to welcome everyone to this conversation. This is being shared through NASPA's Campus Safety and Violence Prevention Knowledge Community in a variety of settings, and eager to bring people back to the Campus Safety Spotlight series that we are doing and highlight some good work happening across the country and on our campuses. My name is Katie Treadwell. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards at the University of Kansas, and also serving as the chair for NASPA's Campus Safety and Violence Prevention Knowledge Community. And I am joined today by Bill and Emily from North Dakota State University. So I will ask them to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Vondell. I'm the Chief of Police at North Dakota State University. I've worked here for 26 years now, and since 2008, I've been the Chief of Police. Our department consists of 15 sworn officers and a couple public safety officers. And as any police department, we're here 24/7. So.
And I'm Emily Frazier. I'm the Assistant Dean of Students at NDSU. I'm just beginning my 20th year here, although in a variety of roles. I primarily work with student conduct for our off-campus student population, as well as with Title IX or sexual misconduct cases, to co-chair our care team, and then work out of the Dean of Students office. So the collective nature of what that work entails.
Great. Well, thank you both. And, I think maybe the most relevant or most timely place to start the conversation is to just ask you to tell us what your life looks like right now with work, coming out of this pandemic, preparing for a new semester. What's on your minds or your agenda right now?
I can start. Coming out of the pandemic, first of all, the pandemic was from the very beginning. We were going through local and statewide policy changes, so it seemed like every day you were sending different guidance to your officers and how you do things. NDSU, we have a very close relationship with all our partners here on campus, so we went from getting called from the wellness center, can you deliver thermometers to certain rooms where people are quarantined? And we were doing that. I mean, it was every day something changed. So it was pretty unique. We had to miss some of the events we enjoy doing, like Emily and I do parent orientation. We do like welcome week. There's a lot of events that we were unable to do, and some of them we could do, virtually, but it's not the same as when you get to meet the students in person. And so preparing for this year coming in, it's kind of refreshing because we've already had meetings about move-in weekend, and we're going to have officers out there to greet the students as they're moving in, help with traffic control. And we're starting to see the regular meetings come up. Excited to get our coffee with the cop back in person, because that's hard to do also virtually when when people are in a group where they can't pull you to the side and ask you questions. And so I like to see that there's some sense of normalcy coming back.
So. I would echo much of what Bill said. I'm looking forward to some of the things that we typically look forward to start out the school year, the events where we're able to really connect with our community. As Bill mentioned, we do family orientation together, and we've really focused on that as kind of a primer for families so that they know there's a lot of infrastructure in place, programming, and response in place for their students to assist with various safety considerations. But then they know that when their students get here, they're going to get that same communication. And it gives them a prompt that, hey, make sure you pay attention to those programs, make sure you attend those things, because we really look at safety as a community effort. Everyone has a different role. Some of us are responding, some of us are educating, and we really reach out to our family members to say, you have a great role in this too, in terms of promoting what we have, because your students may not be thinking safety first when they're coming to campus. One thing I'm personally looking forward to is those of us who work in conduct and threat assessment kind of expect a certain flow to the year. And last year that flow, at least here, was completely different. it was conduct itself was a really weird rhythm. Usually the early fall is really busy and then it slows up. We had the opposite where we had this lull and then all of a sudden it was like all the students were like, I'm tired of not being around people, and there was a boom. And we also anticipate mental health is going to continue to trickle in from after effects from the past year or things that are unresolved. So we're excited for the fun stuff, but we're also preparing for kind of an extra wave of some of those mental health situations that we typically don't start seeing until later in the term. We're anticipating a higher load of that in the earlier semester.
So there's so many things that I want to follow up on just in those introductory things that you all shared. But let's start with family orientation, because that's actually been a topic that a number of NASPA members and student affairs people have come to our knowledge community recently asking questions about how you talk about safety and violence prevention at orientation and with families. And that's ranged from some things that have been really public on campuses, like calls to defund the police or lawsuits that have been made public, how those things show up at orientation. So talk a little bit more about that approach to orienting families to safety conversations on your campus.
I can just get it started, Emily, if you don't mind. And family orientation, Emily and I have been presenting in person for quite a while, but because of last year in COVID, Emily and I went through a PowerPoint and she now recorded it, and that's still going this year. But during that orientation, we talk about when you meet with families. Mostly we're meeting with the parents. We don't see the students, because we always said, like, the students, you know, they want to know where their residence hall room is. They want to know what their classes are. They want to know who maybe their roommate is, that type of stuff. So we feel that they're not ready to hear a safety message yet, but we talk to the family and ask them to bring that back to the student before they come to school. And it's worked well. The families have been very engaged in our presentations, and we provide them resources. In the end, we let them ask us questions, and we're very forthcoming on anything. We're very transparent. We let them know about the sex offenders that live near campus and how we track sex offenders. And, you know, a lot of parents have concerns about that. And so that's a weekly process. We're working, you know, on tracking that. We talk to them about our blue lights on campus, our campus safety service, our apps that you can use for virtual. So it's kind of a unique situation to be able to visit with the parents about that and then ask them to bring that back, because Emily, I think you have a thing at the end of the term where you talk about, you know, it's a group effort and the families are a big part of it, but I'll just let you take it, you know, from there. So.
Sure. So we really try to focus on probably like 3 different cogs of what we have available to their students. One, we have programming and services in place to help them learn more about personal safety, how they can take an active role in that, and then services available to them to aid in those efforts. The virtual escort is something family members are often really excited about, but students aren't always. So this is a way for us to get some information into families' hands where we can say the virtual escort does not track your student at all times. They have to turn it on to use it. Please tell your students that, so they don't think that it's just a way to, you know, monitor their coming and goings. We focus on the educational pieces, things that we have in place to help educate our entire community, those that are both optional and those that are required, so that people are, again, hopefully communicating some of that, hey, you're going to have to take this course. Make sure you take care of that, get that off of your to-do list. And then some of the responsive things that we have in place. So if something happens and they need help, that they know that we have a campus advocate. We have the Dean of Students office and professional hall staff who are there to help them. They can report to our equity office if it were to be a sexual offense or harassment situation or an act of discrimination. So we try to get some of those higher level resources in the family members' hands, so that when their students hear about it for the first time from us, hopefully for a lot of them, it's not the first time they're hearing something about that safety is a priority on our campus. And Bill and I, like he said, we've been doing this for years, and the thing that we tend to hear from families a lot is, you know, this is my fourth kid going to college. I've done this drill at a lot of other campuses. I've done the orientation, and a lot of other campuses aren't doing this. And we really appreciate just hearing from you and the transparency, and not saying like everything's perfect and your student will definitely not have any difficulties, but knowing what they can do if they do experience a problem here or if they have a safety concern.
Great. Emily, you mentioned earlier that you've definitely seen some interesting patterns in conduct over the last year, maybe not matching the timelines, and I am familiar with that as well. We saw peaks in November and March instead of typical times of year, but you also mentioned mental health and knowing that you really needed to ramp up for some mental health support. And that's, I think, your conversation on a lot of campuses always, but in particular right now. What does that look like for you all? What kind of interventions are you planning, or training, things that might be happening to get ahead of some of that support that you know you'll need?
Yeah, so you know, one thing that our campus did the previous year, which was, I wish I could say like we knew this was coming, but we didn't. We had made a transition to turn our direction away from just having a behavior intervention team and expanding our scope to a care team model. And for our campus, what that has ended up looking like is we have our core team where we do our threat assessment. So students where suicide ideation attempt or threats to campus kind of go through that group. But then we've built a much larger network of partners across campus to address care concerns. And that can be anything from students who have had to be gone from campus and we're helping them reintegrate. They have had some type of situation personally or within their family where some additional support would be helpful. College is not what they thought it would be, and suddenly they find themselves struggling in a variety of ways. So we've made this network, and so this summer what we're doing is we're actually expanding that network even more so that we have a better group of people prepared, knowing that we're likely to see both our returning students and our new students presenting with different issues than maybe we have, or seeing them sooner. So we're really prepping our different areas that are our primary touch points to be better prepared for that. Another issue that we've had on our campus, which echoes a lot of others, is we've had a number of situations where free speech versus what might be considered, uncivil or discriminatory situations where we're getting different populations that are feeling unsupported by the campus climate and by their peers or the administration. So we are also working on some restorative practices training this summer so that we can be more prepared when the code doesn't serve us to address it. We can address it through other means and hopefully create campus healing, help those who are feeling that they've been harmed, help those who have, used language that might be legal and not against policy, but to help populations understand how their actions and words impact others. So we're doing a variety of things to be more prepared to help our students, but also more prepared to respond to the types of situations that have come up here in the past year or so.
Great. And Bill, yeah, I know your office plays a big role in that as well. What does that look like for you?
Well, we're part of it, the team, the behavioral or the CARES team. The one thing I'd mention is like behavioral health. When people talk to me, sometimes they ask me questions like, "Oh, what's going on campus? Are you doing this going on that?" Of course, most campuses have their alcohol issues and stuff like that. When I tell people that one of our most frequent calls is mental health issues, I think they're surprised. They try to relate police work to, oh, it's all exciting. It's like what you see on TV. And I think we have a great staff. One of the things we did is we are accredited through, and of course, I'm going to forget the name or the acronym, but we're one of 3 police departments in the state of North Dakota that went through an accreditation process for mental health issues, along with our call center dispatchers, took the training. And so we focus a lot of our training on mental health issues. And the one thing I'd also like to point out is if something happens, sometimes it's late at night. In the morning, we usually have an email where I can send that to Emily. So, I mean, the team has a very good flow. We have residence hall assistants or hall directors. So we're getting that help to the students, in a more prompt manner than probably in the past, where Emily will call me if she has any questions, but we'll deal with it almost the next day and make sure we're getting the proper resources in front of them. So I think some people are surprised when, I talk to even family members like, oh, you've been there for so long, and when you talk about a lot of things you deal with are more mental health related, I think maybe they're not so surprised, or maybe they are. It just seems like I'm careful to focus our training on things that are, related to the campus. I think people just think because we're a police department, we mimic any police department, but that's not. A lot of our training is more vast into mental health things, or anti-bias training, that type of thing that we've been doing lately. So.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually ask about that. I know a lot of campuses, mine included, have some really great student activists who are engaged in some really intentional and complicated conversations around the role of police and mental health and campus safety more broadly on campus. And just wondered if you all have been having those conversations, or if that's been a part of your campus culture recently.
I would say that there has been. I know Casey, the Dean of Student Life, has had those conversations. He had listening sessions, and he did that with, he reached out to every organization on campus, and a lot of them took him up on that. And he met with them, and then he passed on notes to myself and other people across campus. So that has happened, and maybe Emily knows more about that part of it.
Yeah, I would, last summer, I would say, is when we first started getting more of a consistent trickle of communication coming in, where students were reporting, whether it was a department on campus that they felt were not handling things well, or a student posted something online that they wanted to make sure we knew about. We definitely had, over the years, of course, we'd had smatterings, but this became more of a consistent communication. And so Casey, our Dean of Students, this fall started a program essentially called, or I don't know if it's a program, but an effort called the Student Voice Project. Mm-hmm. And he reached out to organizations. Particularly, he was seeking to hear from students who are representing populations that would maybe be particularly impacted by some of the communication that had been happening. But it was an open invite. And like Bill said, many took him up on that. And they met every other week throughout the entire academic year and had different focus areas where he collected, what is your experience? What thoughts do you have? What advice would you have? A lot of different questions where they had an opportunity to speak freely and to know that that information wasn't just stopping there, but it was being sent all the way up the chain of our upper administration, so that the student voice was truly being heard throughout populations of our campus, where sometimes that messaging doesn't go all the way to the provost or the president. So this was a really intentional effort to make sure we are capturing. And one of the topics was police interaction with our university police, and what have their experiences been? What would they like them to be? What can we do better? What are we doing well? But we touched upon a whole variety of topics throughout the year, and that was, I think, really valuable for us as an institution. Of course, I think it was a valuable experience for many of our students to be heard in that manner, and to know that it wasn't just reactive. We weren't just doing it because an incident had occurred and now we want to hear from you. We did it from the very beginning, and and were responsive when incidents occurred that did warrant a different conversation for a meeting, but it was already in action.
Bill, you mentioned earlier a program called Coffee with the Cop that you had to hit pause on with the pandemic, but I know there are a lot of police units on campuses who are trying to focus on building community. Tell us about that program and other things that you all are doing to try to build those relationships.
Yeah, we, at the beginning of the school year, our international students usually arrive a couple weeks before all the other students do. So we do programming with them. Even last year, we were able to set up a room, a big enough room where, because I think it's important. A lot of them are coming to a new culture and they're not sure. So when they see someone in uniform and doing a presentation, we get a lot of good interaction afterwards. So with our international students, we're meeting with them. We work with Welcome Week. We also have what we call Adopt a Cop or police liaison with our residence halls. We've had that for 20 years. It goes way back, but what we do is we assign an officer to each hall. And during the summer, most of our officers already know all the hall directors. We already have that relationship. We get new RAs coming in. So we get involved in RA training so they get to see our officers, before the students arrive. So we like to do a lot of that where our officers are out in front. So that Adopt a Cop presentation we do, or the hall liaison, as we talk to them about things. We ask our officers to stop in there, build a relationship. I think some of the students, like freshmen, they'll see an officer walking through our hall and they're like, what's happening? What's going on? But nothing, just coming to say hi, and just we want to be approachable. And so that's the things we do. We try to focus like an officer on a hall that makes them responsible, build our relationship with the hall director, and then we can go in and do smaller presentations with that hall. The Coffee with the Cop is something that, kind of a national thing, and we've been doing that. I've always found it so interesting because we set up in a busy area in the Memorial Union where students are going to be walking by, and every time we've did it, I've had someone kind of like, hey, can I talk to you over here? Because people have questions I didn't want other people to hear. And it's good to just be there to answer those questions because they probably wanted to ask that question for a long time, but they don't dare stop at a police department there to do it. And so we just want to be approachable. So that's some of the things we do is we try to be out front, meet with the students. We hand out ices on move-in weekend. We control the intersection at one of the busy intersections. We have a squad car there, and our officers, because it's usually hot, are handing out ices. We just want to be very visible. We have a lot of bike officers. We're actually doing training on that in a couple of weeks. So it's better to be on a bike if possible than in a squad car, so we're more approachable. So.
That's great. You mentioned training, and I know that you are both working on what does the fall semester look like, and I'm assuming more densely populated campus and starting to be more normal. What kinds of conversations are you all having about staff support and bringing back your teams to keep doing this kind of work?
So in terms of our campus, we actually reopened pretty much back to normal operations the beginning of June. And so we have the summer essentially to, for those of us who have been apart, we have the opportunity to make those connections, to do that planning. And I think the general tone of NDSU, probably just about every institution out there, is we're just really excited to have our staff connections. We're excited to be able to engage with students in a more personal way than we've been able to over the past year. With that said, though, I will say from the conduct side, there were times where I think Zoom or whatever platform people are using really enhanced the experience for some that could have been worse in person. I met a lot of dogs and cats and saw people how they live. And I think that actually aided in the experience in conduct in some cases, or when I was following up with students for a mental health concern and they, sat in their room and held their CAT and were able to just be more open than they probably would have been if they'd had to find the Dean of Students office in the administration building. So I think, you know, we've learned some good lessons that we can bring into the upcoming year too, that we can be more flexible. You don't have to come to my office for me to help you. But, you know, I think in general, we're ready to bring back traditions that had to be altered or put on hold. We're ready to incorporate what we've learned from the past year and make our menu of services broader than what we traditionally thought, you know, was the way to do things. So I think that's where most people are really looking at this point.
I agree. We did a good job of bringing people back, and our officers are looking forward to getting back to some sense of normalcy. We're excited for this. I'm excited for the school year to start, and I know it's only a couple months away. The one thing that we've already talked about and will continue to talk about is face coverings. Sometimes they've caused some pretty big emotions, and coming back, you know, the university is still making the final decisions on that, but I've talked to my officers about, you know, if you are called to that situation, it's usually because they're not breaking the law, but people's emotions are good. So to be patient. And so I don't know, we didn't experience a lot of that. Emily would probably have a better idea than I would if we weren't called to it. But, you know, there's things like that. I think there's still going to be a lot of people that are a little bit nervous about the start of a school year and getting into classrooms. So we're definitely talking to our officers about being patient, being understanding, which they already are, but I'd have to be a little extra, you know, on guard and just be ready for those types of situations. So
I think that's certainly true on a lot of campuses. So I appreciate, Bill, you sharing that. Last question for you both will be fairly brief today in respect to your time, but other than the mental health pieces that you all talked about, expanding that care network, just curious, any safety or violence prevention priorities that you have for this upcoming academic year?
I'll just start. One of the things that I think Emily would agree with me on is it's very easy for us to reach on-campus students that live here on campus, but we still worry about our students that come here, take classes, they're only here for a few hours, and then they may live 3 blocks from campus. And it's, you know, it's been hard to reach those students in my mind. People would think with social media, wouldn't that be easier? But they also have to accept your, you know, so I've always struggled with making sure our students are safe, even off campus. You know, just because you're on campus, I want you to take what you learn here and spread that across if you're going to the movie theater or if you're going to the local mall, or to be thinking about these things off campus. So it's been hard, but so my focus has always been, we build a relationship. We will be meeting with the student body president and vice president here this summer before school starts. And we ask them if they have anything that they would like to focus on this year. But again, we'll look at early education when the students arrive, getting into the halls earlier, talking to them about safety and letting them know about our campus safety escort service, the blue lights on campus for walking in a high pedestrian area and find themselves alone. All the resources we can provide them. So we're basically going to focus on, in my mind, is just getting back to that sense of normalcy and trying to get the message to them early when they arrive, since it's kind of was lost, I feel, last year with everything that was happening.
Yeah. So something that's definitely on my mind, and I expect a lot of people who primarily work in conduct are thinking as well. Our rhythm was really odd last year. For us, numbers were a lot lower, which was good. It meant that less people were engaging in like the larger gatherings that typically draw attention. But we usually see an influx at the beginning of any normal school year because, you know, that's the time you're coming back, you're reconnecting with friends, or you're trying to meet new people. The weather is good for a while here before our snow flies, and that's our prime time. And I do anticipate that that might be even more enhanced or exaggerated this fall, simply because the past year has been so much about what you can't do and how you have to do it. And most people get pretty tired of, you know, those parameters being around them. So I anticipate a little bit more boundary pushing or just more focus on those social connections that weren't as easily able to maintain last year. And so I know that's just as we think of what we might be dealing with, how do we manage that potential increase in caseload? How do we communicate that while, yes, restrictions are much less than they were a year ago, it doesn't mean we want everyone to have 200 people in their home and engaging in dangerous behaviors, but finding ways to message that without feeling like we're still saying don't do X, Y, Z. I don't think that will be a very productive way to communicate with a group of students who have heard a lot of what they can't do.
Well, Emily, I imagine that you are not the only one thinking through how to do that. I'm certainly doing that as well. And I think a lot of people working in this type of work are wondering what that holds for this next academic year. So I know that you are not alone in that. I will end it there. I so appreciate your time. I'll also mention that if either of you have resources that you'd like to share, if you feel like you've got a good template for the CARES team or build programs out of your team that you want to share with NASPA members, put out there for additional questions, we're happy to link those as well. But we appreciate your time and everyone's time watching today, and we will be back soon with another episode. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Yep, thanks, Katie.
Thank you.